Right now on NBC6, State of Addiction, what every family needs to know about opioids.
The effort is everyone is vulnerable. Everybody can be vulnerable. Anyone is at risk.
The impact opioids are having in our community.
He was euphoric from the first pill.
And the world.
I think I was aware probably around 8 or 9 that he had problems.
Why opioids are more dangerous than ever and what you can do to help.
Addiction is it's secrecy, right? It's sort of living in the shadows.
Information on recovery.
Stopping isn't necessarily the hardest part. You know, we can put it down. It's what happens when we put it down.
The opioid crisis, what every family needs to know about opioids. An NBC6 special brought to you in partnership with DEA 360 and Walmart.
Good evening, I'm Jen Herrera. Welcome to this special edition of NBC6 State of Addiction. Tonight we tackle the tough and scary topic of drug use in our community, specifically the opioid epidemic that is affecting our entire country. Here's a look at the history and how it grew into the monster it is today.
Our 8th grade English class taught us that words ending in the 3 letters OID mean similar to. Thus, opioid means similar to opium, the oldest drug known from ancient agricultural civilizations.
Opium is a tar-like substance that is scraped from the bulb of the poppy plant. It has been used for thousands of years to produce pleasure and to block pain.
In 1804, a German pharmacist isolated the active ingredient in opium and named it morphine, for Morpheus, the Greek god of sleep and dreams.
Morphine was first used to treat soldiers injured in war during the 19th century, including America's Civil War.
In 1874, German pharmaceutical company Bayer introduced its new product called heroin, falsely promoted as a safe, non-addictive substitute for morphine.
At this point, morphine and heroin were sold openly as medicines in pharmacies and in grocery stores. It wasn't until 1914 that they began to be regulated. And in the 1920s, heroin was deemed illegal. But by then, already 200,000 Americans were addicted.
Today, opioids mean any substance, natural or man-made, that binds with the opioid receptors in the brain and body, including heroin and medications like oxycodone, hydrocodone, codeine, morphine, and methadone, as well as pharmaceutical or clandestine analogs of fentanyl.
The drugs slow down and eventually shut off regular body functions, the most life-threatening, shutting down someone's respiratory system.
Slowing down and then ultimately stopping breathing altogether, leading to death, unless immediately reversed with naloxone or artificial respiration.
The drug is so addictive because users develop a tolerance quickly, as soon as a week, which means they need and want more often. But what makes the drug the most addictive is the reaction your body has when it tries to quit.
Opiates' greatest impact comes from the severe physical withdrawal symptoms, including a Category 5 hurricane case of the flu.
Jim, we hear about opioids constantly these days. What makes it different as far as the risk when it comes to young people and these drugs?
Poisonous contaminated street drugs, including counterfeit pills, make substance use today far more dangerous, more addictive, and more deadly. Today, the 21st century requires new approaches to dealing with substance use disorders.
And discussing some of these approaches is why we are here tonight. Coming from a famous family doesn't keep you safe from addiction. Still ahead, Jim Wahlberg is here to share his story of addiction that began at the age of 12, how mistakes from his past have created his life's mission.
Yeah, you can judge, but one of these days it might be in your family.
And a South Florida mom has a powerful message for other parents after losing her son. Stay with us. Welcome back to our NBC6 special State of Addiction. The Wahlberg family is one of the most known celebrity families in entertainment. Mark and Donnie Wahlberg have achieved much success in film, television, and music. Older brother Paul has carved a name for himself in the restaurant world and even has his own reality show, Wahlburgers, on the A&E network. In all, there are 9 Wahlberg children. Jim Wahlberg is among them. He's the executive director of the Mark Wahlberg Youth Foundation, and he's also a recovering addict. I had the chance to speak with Jim about being an addict and how his recovery has become less about himself and more about others.
I was a tornado running through my family. And, I was blessed to find the gift of recovery.
Jim, you started using
recovery
or became an addict, and I don't know what's the right way to say it. You were 12 years old. I have a 12-year-old. Are there?
No. By the time I was 12, I didn't start at 12. By the time I was 12, I was homeless. By the time I was 12, I was a ward of the state. I was in and out of juvenile detention. It started with cigarettes and stealing, a drink out of my father's liquor bottle. And it led to me sort of hanging out with the wrong people. And then the things that we used advanced over a period of time. But now, young people are starting with the most dangerous drugs known to man, right? Now, this is a progressive illness, where it has been determined by medical professionals to be a progressive illness, addiction, right? You're starting with the most dangerous drugs known to man. Where do you progress to? People are dying at an alarming rate, and many of them, the majority of them, are accidental. I ultimately know probably 1,000 moms and dads across the country who've had to bury their children. Just when we think it's starting to get better and we're seeing a downtick in numbers, we get hit with a pandemic that isolates everybody and causes more depression, more anxiety, more everything. And in turn, the drug dealers became essential workers for people suffering from addiction. Now we're seeing this massive uptick in overdose deaths.
As parents watching this special, what can we do? What can we look out for? We all think we know our kids. We don't know everything our kids are doing. So are there certain signs?
Yeah. Well, first of all, the number one thing is communication, right? I keep trying to pound this into parents, right? And some agree and some don't. Our children are not our friends. Our job is not to be cool, right? We need to understand that the word no is a very important part of the process of growing up. We need to be talking to our children. A woman put it to me this way in a post-event interview. She said to me, we talk to our kids when they're young as possible about staying away from strangers. Don't put your hand on the stove. She said, we need to be talking to them about this stuff at that point and getting it into their mind so that they can be repulsed by the thought of this stuff.
We're talking about opioids, and when still, and I'm an adult, I'm an educated adult, I work in the news. When I hear the word opioid, it sounds scary. It sounds like something that would never come into my house. But the reality is, and this is where the problem lies, they're in everybody's house.
Until this epidemic started to affect people from a higher economic standing in nicer neighborhoods and with a different complexion, right? That's when it became important. That's when it mattered. And now, it's far more likely to happen in an affluent community.
It's one thing to get in front of thousands of people and to speak to them, doing these town halls, but to have one-on-ones with our children is sometimes the most difficult. How were those moments like for you when they were at an age, because I know they're older now, to have a candid conversation about your past and your addiction?
Here's the thing. I'm a guy that knows all about drugs and all about addiction and but it still found its way into my home. And I had to deal with it with my own child, right? And I'm not sure that I dealt with it the best way there is to deal with that. Because I don't know what the best way is. There's nothing more scary right, than finding out that your children are on drugs, right? So even though I was doing this work and I thought I was a great example of what not to do and how to sort of live your life after this, it didn't stop my son from putting his hand over the stove, getting it burned, and then going like this, and sticking his other hand over the stove just to make sure that it really burns you. We had a tough couple of years. We really had a tough couple of years, and I learned a lot. I thought I knew what pain was. I thought I knew what a difficulty was, having lived it myself. It was twice as difficult and twice as painful when it was my child.
I respect your honesty with that answer. And I think, if anything, that is a huge reminder for anybody watching that it can happen in any home, especially someone as versed as you are when it comes to the signs to look for. Jim Wahlberg, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
And to learn more about what Jim is doing, you can visit his website. That's jimwahlberg.com. Also, the Mark Wahlberg Youth Foundation. You see it there, markwalbergyouthfoundation.org. And for any more information about opioids, you can always head to dea.gov/operation-engage. The impact of drugs and the drug trade in South Florida is nothing new. Opioids, however, just add another level to the ongoing fight law enforcement is waging against drugs each and every day. Joining me now is Donald P. Garrett, Acting Deputy Special Agent in charge for the Drug Enforcement Agency, Miami Division. Donald, thank you so much for being with us. We know how busy you are. Drugs, like most things, do follow a trend. What are we looking at right now in our communities?
So right now in South Florida, what we're seeing is cocaine still is the #1 drug threat. We're having an alarming uptick in both methamphetamine and especially fentanyl. The fentanyl is something that is laced in quite almost everything that we're seeing, from cocaine to heroin to methamphetamine, as well as to these counterfeit pills that we're seeing.
And for someone, Donald, who doesn't know, fentanyl falls under the opioid category. Which other of those drugs falls under that category?
Under the opioids, we're also looking at heroin.
Now, those may be trending. Are those the biggest seizures right now?
The biggest seizures right now that we continue to see in South Florida is cocaine, with both fentanyl seizures, counterfeit pills, and methamphetamine, especially methamphetamine, on a huge uptick here in South Florida.
When these seizures take place, I have to ask, your human reaction knowing that you're getting these drugs off the street, what does that mean for you and for your team?
Well, it's a great success. It means we saved a life. Based on what the drug is and what things are being mixed with, that we're seeing in South Florida right now, especially on the fentanyl, being mixed with almost everything, and the overdose deaths that we're experiencing nationwide. It's very comforting to know that we may have saved a life, or we may have saved a family member from an addiction or a path to addiction, and just happen to give folks a better quality of life and try to be healthy and drug-free.
You know, you guys are obviously doing your part at the DEA, but where is this originating? Where are these drugs coming from that end up on the streets of South Florida?
So what we see predominantly are these transnational criminal organizations operating in Mexico, mass producing these fentanyl, counterfeit pills, as it relates to that being in our communities here in South Florida. The fentanyl and counterfeit pills specifically are alarming. They're coming across the border in bulk rates, coming right into and infiltrating our communities here, where these transnational criminal organizations from Mexico are working with their criminal networks here in our communities that they associate with, creating devastation and destruction, all for profit.
When it comes to those who are most vulnerable, once those drugs do come across the border, who are we looking at? Is it children we're considering right now, young teens?
What we're seeing from both our outreach programs and our investigative efforts is everyone is vulnerable. Everybody can be vulnerable. Anyone is at risk. What we see specifically right now with the counterfeit pills, which is so alarming, is they are manufactured to look exactly like a legitimate prescribed medication. Adderall, Xanax, Percocet. So what we're seeing is with these counterfeit pills coming across from Mexico, is they're extremely lethal, laced with fentanyl and or methamphetamine and or both. And one pill can actually kill. And that's what we're getting into and trying to educate and make the public aware that these type of substances, specifically these pills, if they're not purchased from a licensed pharmacist, are extremely dangerous and can be lethal if ingested.
Yeah, we are seeing it every single day. Kids need to know that. What about parents? What do parents need to know, Donald? What do they need to be looking out for every day?
So what parents need to do is sit down and have the hard conversation with their children. Have an open dialogue with them. Don't look to punish them for anything that they may tell you, but you have to be engaged in your child's life. Know what they're doing. Look what type of challenges that they may be facing. Look at the social media platforms that they are associating with. Who are they talking to?
And as far as you guys at the DEA, how have your day-to-day operations changed in light of what's happening with opioids and the prevalence?
Certain tactics and techniques that we use from an investigative standpoint have changed. And nowadays what we're seeing is with the fentanyl being laced in almost every type of drug or illicit drug that we are investigating, or the diversion of prescription drugs at times, what we find is the analysis is really what tells us what is in that substance. So how we handle that substance from inception to the lab is critical for safety for all involved.
You guys also have made strides when it comes to education and prevention. In addition to doing shows like this virtual town hall, what else is the DEA doing?
Well, right now we have a public health alert, safety alert that we have issued. It was issued in September of 2021 as it relates to these counterfeit pills and the danger and how lethal that these pills can be. Coupled with that, we have what's called a One Pill Can Kill campaign. And this One Pill Can Kill campaign is coupled with our enforcement strategy and community outreach efforts to make the public aware of the dangers, the trends, and how lethal these counterfeit pills can be.
I'll tell you what, our community, a little relieved that you guys have our back on this one. We continue to make strides. We know that you guys do as well. Donald, Garrett, thanks so much for joining us here on NBC6.
Thank you.
Still to come, a former student athlete loses his life after being prescribed pain pills. The lessons one mom has learned, she tells other parents exactly what to look out for. We've heard it several times already tonight. Opioids don't discriminate. They don't care where you live, where you're from. They don't care about the color of your skin. It doesn't matter. These drugs can be lethal. Cindy Dodds learned this after losing her 24-year-old son, Kyle. Cindy was brave enough to retell her story in hopes that no parent will have to go through what she has.
Kyle's a beautiful, beautiful boy. I mean, the girls loved him. He was extremely loyal to his friends, to his family, to his teammates. He was the captain of the football team. He was just a natural born leader. He also rooted for the underdogs, you know, the people that would come into the school, and he'd make sure they were comfortable. And he's just a great kid.
I know that there was a football injury. How did that injury impact the rest of your life?
Well, that game was particularly violent. They triple teamed him and tore his shoulders, and that was it. So that was in 10th grade. He got surgery. And then he rehabbed very, very hard. And that was the introduction of Oxycontin, hydrocodone, the opioids for the pain. And as soon as he was done rehabbing with that shoulder, he got the second one done. So it was extended. You know, he went off of it in between, and then it was extended. The thing that we noticed about Kyle is, if I get an opioid, I hate it. I hate the way it makes me feel. I get off it as soon as I can, you know, if I have an injury. He was euphoric from the first pill. And then as it started to wane, or he started fearing that the pain was going to come back, he'd start asking for it in 3 hours. I'm like, you can't have it for another hour. We're not going to do this. The doctor that was giving him the pain medicine is one of the ones that was lied to by the pharmaceutical companies and told it was a 1% addiction rate. Don't worry about it. These drugs are safe. Now we know it's 70% and more. And so what happened to Kyle is it took over his brain. He was asking for it all the time, and then when he couldn't legitimately get it anymore, well, that's when you're buying them on the street or you're seeking something else. After his senior season with the football, he didn't get a major scholarship. He got a D2 in North Carolina.
Which is still fantastic.
Yeah, but he was not happy with that. He's a D1 in his mind prospect. So the wheels came off and he got a DUI. And we're starting to see things that we had no idea what was going on. And it went very quickly and led into his first overdose that summer. And fortunately, I was a first responder. And he went on to do 8 rehabs, in and out of treatment, doing great, recovering. But that opioid addiction is like, he called it the monster in his head that wakes him up in the middle of the night with cravings already. Even though you've been in recovery for a good stretch, 3, 4, 5 months, it's still there. And addiction ran very, very deep in Kyle. For some people, it's not as deep, but for him, it really ran deep.
Cindy, do you remember after the first surgery, the doctors handing you pills? And I mean, do you have that moment like, oh, here, take these every...
Oh, yeah.
Could you ever imagine, did you know about opioid addiction?
No,
Because most of us didn't then.
No, it was, I trusted him, and he's a great doctor, and I've actually gone back to him and educated him. He put an adolescent pain specialist on his staff after Kyle. It was it's just a very sad scenario for so many.
Sadly, there are ignorant people out there who will be watching this saying, that wouldn't happen to my kid. If that happened to my kid, I would do this, 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 and this. What do you say to those people?
I was that person at one time. Until it hits you and you see this person change in front of you and have no control over their life anymore, yeah, you can judge, but one of these days it might be in your family. I would say to that person, listen to this education, store it away. When you start to see things that are a little off, especially as a mom, you know in your gut, when you start to see things like big pens in my house with no guts in them, what is that used for? To snort. I didn't know that, but as it all started coming to the surface, I'm like, well, I missed this, and I missed this, and I missed this. I tell them, be their mom, don't be their friend. You have every right to search their rooms. You have every right to do whatever you need to do. And I mean, there's a lot through the law that you can do to get your kid help if they don't want help.
You said, and I don't remember verbatim, but that Kyle would refer to the drug as a monster.
Monster in his head.
He knew the level of his addiction?
Oh yeah, this is years later. Yeah. I mean, he eventually beat opioids. And what happened to him was, it was after Jose Fernandez died, and he really admired him. It was the next day, I could see he was agitated, and he had something to drink. Then he smoked a joint. I knew as soon as that started, the wheels were coming off again. So that night, he spent the night in his car. We took his keys, and I said, you gotta come up or we're locking the door, you know? And somehow he got a shower in the morning, and he went off to work. And it was about 6:45 in the morning. He knew he needed something to get him up because he was really depressed. And so he went for a bump of cocaine. And they mixed in the deadly fentanyl that's killing so many kids right now and adults. And carfentanil, which is an elephant tranquilizer. That's what they use to stop a bull charging elephant. And it's 2 to 3 grains of sand is the equivalent that kills you. So what's out there now, he thought he was safe, because he wasn't an IV user and because he was off the opioids. And he thought he could just get this and be fine and just start over that day. But that's what a lot of people are thinking about these fake pills that are out here now, that they're safe, they're not.
After losing your son, your fight did not stop.
No.
You continue to educate, you continue to fight for Kyle. Why? I mean, as a mother, I'll be honest, Cindy, I don't know how you get out of bed and put your clothes on and put your makeup on and do your hair, because...
I hear it in your voice, Jen. I had a crisis of faith, and I had a crisis of purpose after Kyle died, because I've been working for so hard and so long to keep him alive, to keep him, trying to provide opportunities for him and, give him a great life so that he could see his way through. But the problem is, Jen, these kids' brains, once you introduce this type of drug into their brains, a boy's brain is not formed till 25, and the last thing to form is the judgment center. So they're just running on hormones and feeling good and dopamine. So you introduce this, and that's where all of their coping skills goes to the drugs.
Do you feel Kyle with you often?
Yeah, he's with me. I know he's with me. I think he knew he had it so good that he had no excuse in addiction. He could not forgive himself, and he died in his shame. I mean, that's the hard part about addiction. And that's one of the messages I want people to know. And if Kyle was here today, I would say, guess what? They lied those drugs were 70% addictive, and you fell into that trap.
Well, you remain the champion for your son and for his message. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Honestly. I want to thank Cindy and the entire Dodds family for sharing their story. It is not an easy one to tell. It reminds all of us to communicate with our kids constantly. But speaking with our children about drugs, we know it can be tough. So how much do we tell them? How do we know when they're ready to have these conversations? To help us navigate through this process is Dr. Daniel Bober, who specializes in the psychiatry of children and teens. Dr. Bober, thank you for being with us here for this very, very important special. How does the conversation get started when it comes specifically to opioids?
Well, I think it starts very early when kids are young. You have to establish a foundation of trust, of love, of open communication. And so I think if you can lay down that foundation, it makes it easier to have these conversations later on. And we want to make sure that we're having these conversations that are age appropriate. So we really want to think about the age of the child and the things that you're saying and make sure that it's at a level that they can understand it.
One 12-year-old may be different than another 12-year-old. So developmentally, what should we keep in mind?
So that's absolutely true. But, there are some general guidelines. Younger children, you may want to keep it simpler. And the older they get, the more complicated or the more detailed you can make it. But with younger children, sometimes it's good to find a teachable moment. And that might be while you're watching a movie or a show, and there's a situation that you could sort of use as a springboard to have that conversation. Whereas older kids, you can be more direct and bring it up in a way that is closer to an adult level.
We constantly hear communication, it's key when it comes to raising children, but parents with teens at home, sometimes communication is hard. Sometimes it's like pulling teeth to get information. Do you have any suggestions how to keep the conversations going as they do continue to get older and they're not in our sight all the time?
So I think it's important to make sure that you're not lecturing your kids. I think you want to come at it from a perspective of not being judgmental, of not shaming them, of talking to them and try to make it more open-ended. For example, what are some of the things that you've heard about pain pills, or what are some of the things that you've heard about opioids in the news, and sort of get an idea of where they're starting from and work with them where they're at and then go from there.
Dr. Bober, is it a good idea to scare our kids, to scare the heck out of them with the realization that, hey, you think something's in this, it could be something completely different, here's what can happen, or is that a little too extreme?
So, I think with 120 overdose deaths every day in this country, it's something that we want to be direct about. But I also feel like you don't want to do it in a way where you're trying to scare them. I like to look at it like an illness, like any other illness, whether it be diabetes or high blood pressure or heart disease. In fact, the rates of treatment and success are very similar to those diseases as well. So I think we have to look at it like a medical problem that there is treatment for and that people do get better. And there may even be members of their own family who've suffered from addictions, and sometimes you can use that as, again, a way or an entry into the conversation and to say, hey, remember when Uncle Bob was, in the hospital for that situation? Well, that was because, he was using pain pills and it really affected him and he was very ill. So I think there's different ways to do it depending on their background and the situation.
And this statistic that you provided us with is alarming. 2 out of 3 kids actually are exposed to these drugs for the first time from what they have found inside their home or a friend's family home. I mean, that's a huge wake-up call for parents.
Absolutely. I think there's a myth out there that these kids are getting it from doctors, but no, they're getting it from their friends. They're getting it from their friend's grandmother. It's very accessible and very easy to get, which is why as parents, we really need to be on top of the situation, because we know that, for example, between 1997 and 2002, there was actually a 2-fold increase in pediatric overdoses. So these are kids that were in their parents' home and found, loose pills or whatever their parents were using and overdosed on it. So it's a very serious public health problem.
Dr. Bober, you and I were teenagers a long time ago, but that feeling of peer pressure, we remember it. Peer pressure is the real deal. As parents, what can we do to kind of navigate our kids through some tough situations they'll be facing when it comes to peer pressure?
So it really goes back to their self-esteem, right? Which you as a parent can do, can help them develop. So peer pressure is particularly relevant in this age group because you've got teenagers who are not quite adults. They're struggling to find their own identity, self-concept. They want to feel competent in the world. So the best thing that we can do is try to give them that self-esteem so that they're in a situation, in a group like that they can actually push back and have the strength to do that. That their approval of themselves is worth more to them than the approval of those other people. But on a more practical level, you can give them an exit strategy, a situation where if they feel uncomfortable, that they can text you or they can call you to try to get you out of that situation. And sometimes there's a code phrase that you can use. It really depends on how you want to do it, but it's a way for them to extricate themselves out of the situation.
I know that we use a code emoji in our house. No words necessary, just a certain emoji, and mom and dad will be there to help. Dr. Bober, I can't tell you how much this conversation means, not only for us here at NBC6, but our entire community. Thank you for being with us tonight.
It's my pleasure.
Coming up, how one South Florida woman was able to get clean and her advice to family members who are watching a loved one spiral, how to be supportive without enabling an addict. Welcome back to this special NBC6 presentation, what every family needs to know about opioids. Finding the right resources when you or a loved one needs help, it's easier than you may have thought once, of course, you're ready to take that step. I'm joined now by Angela Ventura, chair of the United Way of Broward County, with more on where those in need can find the help they are looking for. Angela, thank you so much for being with us tonight. Let's start first with 3 numbers that every family needs to remember: 211.
So 211 is the first call for help, and it's very important for everybody to know that. They also offer services to seniors, to adults, and they provide referral services to healthcare and also social services. They provide free information and referral to healthcare, and they also provide services, information to uninsured and underinsured individuals. They also have a 24/7 confidential emotional support. So individuals that are in need of help, they can contact them, they can call them.
As far as the United Way, when looking at your website, it's pretty impressive when it comes to the resources that are there. If somebody's battling, they think maybe they do have a problem, maybe addiction is in their lives. Is there a place to do a self-assessment?
Absolutely. BARC, the Broward Addiction and Recovery Center, they have they have a self-assessment tool on their website, and it's very important because sometimes we have an issue and we don't know it. So they have a set of questions. People can go through those questions, answer them, and depending on the responses, they may realize that they have an issue and they can reach out to BARC for help. And they have help for individuals with co-occurring disorders, substance use disorders, and they provide detoxification. They also provide residential treatment, medication-assisted treatment.
Showed us the brochure, those brochures with the information also online. What other websites are available, Angela?
Well, there is also SAMHSA, the SAMHSA National Helpline, which is 1-800-662-HELP. And this also offers free, confidential, 24/7 treatment, referral, and information services in English and in Spanish. We also have meetings. We meet once a month. We have different groups addressing different issues. We have the community response team addressing the opioid epidemics. So, and we meet once a month, and these meetings are free and open to the community. So everyone is welcome.
So far tonight, we've heard from a wide range of experts and people with personal stories about their past addiction and how they treated them. Now we're going to speak with someone who's still in the process of recovery. Nicole Morin, certified recovery peer specialist, joins me now. Nicole, first, thank you for being here. I think it's very brave of you to be here. Why do you think it's necessary to participate in events like this one tonight?
Well, first off, I just want to thank you for having me. I also want to say that it's very important for me to participate in events like tonight to allow others to know and families that recovery is possible.
When it comes to the substances, Nicole, which ones were you using? Which ones got out of control?
So I was using opiates, I was using heroin, and I was using cocaine as well as other substances, but the opiates is really what got me.
Our immediate thought is, how did it come to that?
Well, what I could tell you is, I was an adolescent who used at a very young age. I started at the age of 11, 12. A lot of it started due to some inner anxieties that I was feeling as an adolescent. I had a lot of peer pressure from the neighborhood that I grew up in. There was a lot of substances and alcohol and, things being used, a lot of broken homes, and, a lot of the pressure was on to be cool and to fit in, and that, led me to where it led me in the coming years.
And I think those pressures, those aren't new. Those are something that span generations, no matter what. Did you ever hear the question from people who didn't understand, why can't you just stop?
Yeah, I did. A lot of the times, I think it's always the biggest question. And in my experience, stopping isn't necessarily the hardest part. We can put it down. It's what happens when we put it down. And what I mean by that is, once I put that substance down, and I did multiple times, like I said, I started using substances at an early age. I didn't begin, my consistent journey of recovery till I was 27. It was what happens when I put it down. So now that I don't have this substance in my body to mask the trauma, to mask the depression, to mask the anxiety, and to mask the shame and the guilt that I felt, was the biggest challenge that I faced. I was blessed that I was linked to the community, that I was linked with peer support and fellowships and, therapies and things like that to help me to finally get through all of those experiences and to really dig into myself to help me to not have to pick up that substance.
Nicole, with that said, are relapses common?
The first time I entered a treatment facility, I was 18. The last time I was 27. So for me, personally, it was a constant cycle for me. I was in and out of treatment centers. I was having lapses of symptoms over and over again. But I know people who they did not have that experience. They were able to go to treatment or stop using one time, find a fellowship, find therapy, or find their journey of recovery, and they never did have that relapse or lapse of symptoms.
Imagine it's a process every day. What was that moment, or what was that final straw that made you realize, I don't want to live this life, I want something more, I want something better?
Yeah, so, that I think about that often, and, what kind of led me, and it was a lot, I was in 2 comas. I had overdosed on heroin twice. Multiple treatment centers, multiple detoxes and things like that. But, it was that inner feeling. I was sick of being tired. I was sick of hurting everybody that I love. I was sick of hurting myself. And I got to a point where I knew that life had to have more meaning than the life that I was living. I told myself, I'm going to give myself one last chance to ask for help. And I did, and, thank God to the court system who, really the judge. There was a judge there in Broward County who, when I was in the drug court system, gave me that last chance. I asked and I begged to go back to treatment one more time, and the judge looked at me and said, I'm going to give you a chance. And here I am over 8 years later. I'm a mom, I'm married, I've worked with youth for 4 years as a life coach, helping youth to get on a journey of recovery, and it's just been really amazing.
I love that you're giving that judge credit, because what a difference that person made in your life still 8 years later. What advice, Nicole, do you have for families who are currently struggling? They feel like their hands are tied, they don't know what to do.
Yeah, the advice that I would give to the families is, number one, find a path of wellness for yourself. Take care of you. You have to set those boundaries. It is challenging working with a loved one who is struggling. So you need to be well and you need to be healthy. You can show love to the person in your life who is suffering without enabling them. And that's what we need. If it wasn't for the love of my family, excuse me, but for the support, the continued support that I received over the years, not enabling, they didn't enable me. They had boundaries, but knowing that I had that family support and that inspiration when I was in jail or when I was in a low place really kept me going and allowed me to continue that little ounce of hope that I had that I was going to get my family back. What I also want to say to the families, if you do have a young loved one that is using opioids to carry Narcan, you can get it for free. You can go to your local recovery community organizations or United Way or these organizations that will give it out for free because you never know when you're going to need it. I carry it in my purse all the time.
Faith, family, the community, and the resources that you had, and that judge, but also you, Nicole, you deserve credit as well for getting on the other side of this. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. We appreciate your time, and congratulations.
Thank you so much for having me.
From actors to comedians to professional athletes, opioids and their fatal effects are making headlines monthly. How one young actor has been impacted by the drugs and the role he recently took on that hits very close to home. Welcome back. Several celebrities have made headlines in recent years after losing their lives due to accidental drug overdoses involving opioids. Actor Michael K. Williams, best known for his role in The Wire, died this year, as did former professional hockey player Jimmy Hayes. Toxicology reports confirmed he died from a mixture of cocaine and fentanyl. Comedian Fuquan Johnson passed away along with two friends after a night of partying and combining similar drugs. A few years ago, we lost rapper Mac Miller, as well as Los Angeles Angels pitcher Tyler Skaggs.
Purdue Pharma, they've been marketing the drug as something that's non-addictive when it clearly is.
All your doctors are going to be asking, how is this even possible? Your most effective talking point are these magic words.
Less than 1%. Less than 1%.
Less than 1%.
Less than 1%.
They told me that less than 1% would become addicted.
Dope Sick is a new series on Hulu that tells the story the pharmaceutical companies have played in the opioid epidemic. It stars Michael Keaton, among other big names, as well as actor Alex Barone.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
Hey yo, hands up if you a little different. Party don't stop when you this gifted.
Alex was born with a congenital condition called fibular hemimelia. His disability has motivated him throughout his life, and so has his late father, who was an addict. It's why when he was offered a role in Dope Sick, he knew he had to take it.
My grandmother's house in her pool, and he was lifting me up on top of the roof, kind of handing me up on top of the roof, and he had slipped and I slipped on top of him. So we had tumbled off the roof together and landed on top of each other and then rolled into the pool. And I was probably 3 or 4 years old. I don't remember why that's my fondest, but it was like the most exciting, and none of us got hurt. We kind of laughed afterwards, but that was just a memory that I have.
Do you remember what age you were when you realized that your father was an addict?
I was 13 when he had passed away. My mom had told me that he had some personal problems, and kind of explained what the drugs and alcohol were. But I don't think I really understood that even at 13. I didn't fully comprehend what that meant at the time. But I think I was aware probably around 8 or 9 that he had problems, but I just couldn't wrap my little head around that.
Once you were older and you learned more, do you know what his drugs of choice were and how he started down that path?
I think it started off with drinking a lot. After that, he got involved, I think, with, he was arrested for robbery and for drinking and driving and these sorts of things. And then I think it was either in prison or right after that he started dabbling with opioids and with heroin. And that ultimately became his drug of choice, and how he passed away was heroin.
I know that you were very young through most of it, but do you remember watching your dad struggle?
I do have memories of him with my mom, kind of altercations, domestic abuse and whatnot. And I had to have been maybe 2 or less at that time, which is crazy. I remember that. But I do remember being in a car seat that young and kind of seeing my dad be out of control and with my mom and everything while she was driving and trying to rip her out of the car. And obviously it wasn't himself at that time. He was under the influence. But I only remember that if I really think. The other memories I have are mostly fond.
All of us, myself included, we all turn out a certain way based on life experience, based on how we were raised, what impacted us as children. You have found success despite everything. Do you think your dad's battle with addiction was a motivating factor for you to take the path that you've taken?
I do, yeah. One of the things that I found it motivating, because one of the things that made me want to be an actor in the first place and move out to California was the fact that he had always wanted to come out west. We were all from Baltimore, and he had made it his mission to move and travel out west. He made it as far as Arizona before he had passed away. And I feel like, I had a lot of surgeries growing up. I had 43 surgeries growing up, and I had my own struggles with opioids, not because of recreational, but because of just pain and everything. And then it became kind of recreational use in high school as my way to connect with him. I wanted to connect with him somehow after he passed. And I thought, hey, if I dabble with this, maybe I'll connect in that way. But I do feel like from beyond the grave, he was motivating me to put that stuff down and to focus on my dreams. And
you said you dabbled in opioids here and there, but I mean, it tends to be genetic. Are you very careful with what you choose to do recreationally?
I am very careful with what I choose to do recreationally. I do agree with you. I do think it's genetic addiction. After my surgeries and being I had to go through withdrawal in the hospital during all my surgeries because I was on so much. But then even after all my surgeries, like I said, I did dabble and try it as a way to connect with him. They feel really good. I can understand why people get hooked and the dopamine and the feeling you get and the false sense of confidence you get on it. But I feel like ultimately it just wasn't, I was faking it. And I didn't want to end up like him. I didn't want to do that to my family and my mom and my siblings. So yeah, I'm very careful about what I do and what I put in my body and kind of where my headspace is.
He continues to lie about the drug safety to doctors, to patients, and the FDA. We have a major case here.
You are close, obviously, to this crisis because of your life, but also through your work. When you were presented the script for your new series based on the pharmaceutical companies and the roles they played, I mean, what was your reaction at first reading that script? Was there anger?
Yeah, there was anger, and there was also excitement because I had never, seen movies about addiction, about recovery and everything, but I had never known the true story about the opioid pandemic and kind of how it originated in this country and how it kind of blossomed into what it is today with other things like fentanyl and worse things. And to finally be able to hear and understand the story. And I hope that the rest of the world, when they see the show, I think it's going to hit home for a lot of people and close to home. And it's heartbreaking.
It's like you were destined to be a part of it.
Yeah, even in the audition process, they said, why would this story, what does this story mean to you? And part of my audition was explaining the story about my father and my connection with opioids in my life and everything. So yeah, like you said, so close to home and I'm so happy to be a part of it.
Alex, thank you for being a part of this. We really appreciate it. So nice to speak with you. You've been so candid about things that are pretty personal. So thanks again.
Thank you for having me, Jen.
We'll be right back. So much of the information provided tonight was scary, hard to hear, hard to talk about, but the opioid epidemic is one that we all need to be aware of. We need to pay close attention to it for the sake of our children and for the sake of our community. Here are some phone numbers once again in case you are interested in learning more or getting more help. Also some websites. We'll put them on your screen. We will also have them on our website at NBC6.com. And don't forget that number we talked about earlier at 211. Also on Tuesday night, November 16th, we will be hosting a Facebook Live on the NBC6 Facebook page to answer questions and to keep the conversation going when it comes to opioids in our community. A big thank you to everyone who participated in tonight's special, and a big thank you to all of you for watching. Be safe and have a good night.
I was in 2 comas. I had overdosed on heroin twice.
I wasn't thinking about what might happen. I was thinking about, I knew what could happen because it happened to me already.
Treatment, doing great. I'm recovering, but that opioid addiction is like, he called it the monster in his head that wakes him up in the middle of the night with cravings already.
I had to go through withdrawal in the hospital during all my surgeries because I was on so much.